Good afternoon and welcome. We will get started in just a minute. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. 1 second. Okay. Welcome. Good afternoon and welcome to Vibrant Pittsburgh's Resilience Through Equity series. These learning sessions are an opportunity for Vibrant Pittsburgh to highlight and tackle critical opportunities to improve the practices, policies, and cultures of organizations in the Pittsburgh region, increasing the impact of our collective diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Our session today is being recorded. My name is Allegra Elson, and I serve as Director of Training and Development with Vibrant Pittsburgh. I will be your host and moderator for today's session, a panel discussion on the business case for supplier diversity. Today's session will provide insight, information, and tangible steps to further your supplier diversity journey. In today's session, we'll take a moment to define the different aspects of supplier diversity. I'll introduce you to our panelists, and from there, we'll jump right into the discussion. Please use the question and answer for questions for our panelists, and use the chat to introduce yourselves and for any comments. When we talk about supplier diversity in terms of companies, organizations seeking to engage minority and women-owned suppliers can disrupt bias, equalize the playing field, and build wealth networks in under-resourced communities. By collecting data on the diversity of their suppliers, an organization can gain awareness of spending patterns and redirect resources accordingly. Inclusive procurement delivers broader societal benefits by generating economic opportunity for underserved communities. The U.S. Small Business Administration estimates there were 8 million minority-owned companies in the United States as of 2018. The National Minority Supplier Diversity Council reports that certified minority business enterprises, MBEs, generate $400 billion in economic output that lead to the creation or preservation of 2.2 million jobs and $49 billion in annual revenue for local, state, and federal tax authorities. A diverse supplier is a business that is at least 51% owned and operated by an individual or group that is part of a traditionally underrepresented or underserved group. Common classifications are small business enterprises, SBEs, minority-owned enterprises, MBEs, and woman-owned enterprises, WBEs. Over time, the definition of diversity has expanded to businesses owned by other minority groups, such as LGBTQ+, veterans, and owners with disabilities. With that introduction, now allow me to introduce you to our panelists. I'm very excited about the expertise that is coming your way today. Danielle Bachman is a chemical engineer and president of ProShare Services. ProShare Services' core values include putting people, trust, integrity, safety, and the environment first. ProShare Services provides turnkey project delivery services in engineering, procurement, and construction in the oil and gas, utilities, commercial construction, and renewables industries. They are a Pittsburgh-based consulting firm that specializes in strategic planning and innovative solutions for businesses nationwide. Marko Grigorevich is the Director of Minority Business Growth for the Equity and Inclusion Division at the Greater Cleveland Partnership, and is State Director of the Ohio MBDA Business Center, where he oversees programming intended to help minority-owned businesses connect with resources and opportunities to help them scale. Ron Hicks is the president and a founding member of the Three Rivers Business Alliance and a commercial trial attorney at Porter, Wright, Morris, and Arthur LLP. As an affiliate of the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, 3RBA is the only chamber in the Pittsburgh Greater Allegheny region dedicated to promoting the interests of LGBTQ+ businesses and their allies. In 2021, thanks to 3RBA's advocacy, Pittsburgh became the first city in Pennsylvania to enact legislation including LGBTQ-owned businesses in its economic and procurement programs and contracts. Ebony McQueen Harris is an advocate, strategist, and thought leader for diverse business enterprises. She manages the UPMC Supplier Diversity and Inclusion Program. including its strategies and initiatives, providing strategic direction and guidance for the management of diverse certified business partners and diversity spend system-wide. Ebony has a bachelor's in communications and a master's in instructional leadership. Ebony is a 2021 EDGE Women's Executive Leadership Program graduate. George Robinson is Director of Supplier Diversity and Inclusion at UPMC. He focuses on internal and external customer experience and forms pathways to positive results-based performance of UPMC's Supplier Diversity and Inclusion Program. He strengthens and supports a team who develops, executes, and manages a dynamic and comprehensive supplier diversity initiatives. He works to further enhance diverse supplier talent within UPMC's corporate spend spheres of influence, with a focus within UPMC's supply chain management and department. So thank you all for being here. I'm really looking forward to the discussion. So this will be a question for all of you, but we will start with Danielle. So, and from your perspective, and we have a large organization, we have a small business here, those of you who consult with small businesses. So why is it important for individuals and companies in our region to understand and consider supplier diversity? And Danielle, I'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. So I believe that it's very important to include diverse companies whenever you guys are bidding out projects or doing any type of role or any type of work that you're executing, because a lot of times diverse firms execute at a higher quality standard. They're also cost effective, as well as they can do quick turnarounds. So what a lot of larger companies are doing are utilizing their tier 1 suppliers, and they will take some of those smaller scopes of work and sub those out to diverse firms where they need a quicker turnaround.
Great, thank you. I'm going to move to Marco with the same question.
Thank you, Allegra, and good afternoon, everyone. From my perspective, thing to always keep in mind about supplier diversity is what the implication really is. Diversity of culture, diversity of background leads to a different approach to problem solving and essentially making the business case, right? What does that really mean? It means you can drive innovation, and you can also drive price point, right? And improve competition at the same time. So I think that's the value add and the argument to be made around supplier diversity programs.
Okay, thanks. And maybe later, Marco, you and I had an interesting conversation about how some people think using diverse suppliers is more expensive, but I think you were later going to make the point that it helps to drive competition. So,
right.
Okay. Ron, I'm going to pass it to you.
Well, I'm actually going to follow up with Marco's thought. That's my thought as well, is that I think study after study shows that when you have more people who have different ideas and different approaches to how to resolve problems, you end up having the better business case. In the law area, typically we picked our vendors by whoever our assistants knew as either their brother, sister, cousin, or best friend, and not necessarily by who actually was probably the best qualified for that job. And most law firms are now recognizing that they have to be intentional about who they hire, whether that be for court reporting services, whether it be for who the copy vendor is, or videographer services, or even jury selection services. When you bring in people who have different views and different perspectives on various aspects of life, you get a better result. And so I think diversity for supplier diversity is important because it just simply brings in more ideas to the table.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ron. Ebony, I'd like to move to you, please.
Sure. Thank you, Allegra, as well as your colleagues at Vibrant Pittsburgh for inviting UPMC to the conversation. Glad to be here alongside my colleagues today. So thank you, as well as your team, again, for inviting us. I would add to what Ron and Danielle and Marco have said. We talked about it being a case of business. It's a business strategy. I also want to highlight the fact of it being an investment in community and a reflection of community and the end user that the company is engaging with, the company or organization is engaging with. And so where does that value come in for a case of supplier diversity is the utilization of those, companies within those diverse businesses within reach, and making sure that we are having an impact economically, locally, as well as, making it spread nationally and then globally. So factoring everything that, Danielle, Ron, and Marco have said, and of course, I wouldn't be with UPMC, so I already know that George is going to add some value to this as well too, which I would align with as well. But I wanted to just highlight those two: the economic impact in an investment in community, and what that reflection looks like within the organization and company.
Yeah, thank you, Ebony. I think that's an important point to remember, that the money then also stays in the community, it circulates in the community, and we know that usually $1 spent in the community translates into $1.50 for the community. There's some statistics around that, so that I sometimes refer to it as a circular economy, but keeping the money within the communities and adding that economic development to the community. So thank you. George, I'd like to get your perspective.
Yeah, not much more that I can add, although
Okay.
I did not hear anyone mention the reflection of their own customer base. And so with UPMC being a large healthcare provider in Southwestern Pennsylvania, with hospital facilities in 3 states, 4 countries, very important aspect of our ability to execute life-changing medicine is for us to reflect the community and customer base that we serve. And our Supply Diversity Inclusion Program takes full scope of that perspective as a part of our strategy and vision setting on how we operate within UPMC. So everything that everyone else said, but also looking at the customer base that's being served.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to actually ask some more questions around this. Danielle, I'm going to take this question to you, thinking about as a woman-owned business, and you're running ProShare Services. So what are some things that you have found that as a diverse supplier you have needed to have in place to excel and to show your value as a diverse supplier to bigger companies?
Before I went out and marketed our company to the public, I wanted to make sure that we had all of our certifications in place. And the nice part about getting certified is that it takes you through all of the steps to set up your business so that you have that initial foundation to succeed. And then I had to make sure that I had a strong team in place. So although ProShare is a one-person show, I have a lot of mentors with a lot of experience in oil and gas and other industries that are there helping, because they know that this is part of a bigger picture and a bigger movement. So that kind of helps get us ready, and we want to make sure that we succeed working with our customers. One thing that I got in place very early was finding a good lawyer, because that is one of the most important aspects, especially working with large companies. We wanted to make sure that we're covered, but we also want to make sure that our customers are covered, and we want to make sure that it's a good agreement for both sides so that we can be successful when working for them.
Mm-hmm. Can you speak to briefly, Danielle, a few of the hurdles around certification? I've heard from other diverse suppliers that there's a lot, and I'm going to direct this also to you, Marco, that there's just a lot of hoops to jump through. And there's a lot of things with different portals, applying to different portals. And that's also going to be a later question for Ebony and George around the UPMC supplier diversity portal. Like, what are some hurdles that you found as you were getting set up in your certification and then dealing with different portals?
I think from the certification standpoint, I'm lucky in the fact that there's a lot of accountants in my family, but I could see that being a hurdle, asking for profit loss statements or some of those business documents that, whereas before, if you were someone in an execution position at a larger company or smaller company, and now you're running the whole gambit, those are skills that you have to develop when doing your business. So that, but there are people out there, I believe, that you can pay them and they will set everything up for you and bring you through the certification process. So I've seen that online.
Okay, thank you. Marco, I'm going to ask you, since you work with diverse suppliers? What are some things that you help them? What are some things that they need to have in place to be successful? And what are some of the things that you help them with to get over those hurdles?
Sure. So to answer the first question is challenging because it depends on the industry or the sector that they work in, right? There are some specific spaces where certification is a requirement just to get in on a project or to even be able to compete. There are others where maybe professional services or those in professional services sometimes don't necessarily have to. It really always depends on who your prospect client is and what their requirement is per their own internal supplier diversity programming. So that varies, right? What we do see ideally, at least for high growth potential firms that are competing for larger contracts, is they typically have their capability statements put together. If they need certification, they acquire it and they try to land the they try to get the 2-for-1 deal where they try to land the certifications that'll cover the largest ground. I don't know if you have the same challenges in Pittsburgh, but for instance, in our market, we have certification for the city, certification for the sewer district, certification for this, certification for that. Then you have the NMSDC, you have the state. There's so many different hoops that people have to jump through just to be able to compete for particular contracts. So having a clear understanding of what you need to compete in those particular spaces is crucial. But I think even before that, it's having a clear prospect list. Who are your clients you're going for? What you need, and understanding what you need to get in front of them. If we're talking about private sector is a matter of sometimes just getting on people's their online vendor portals and understanding that you have to be on there even before you can have the conversation. So that's kind of like the intro piece to it, and what's needed on the front end. Now, remind me, Allegra, what's the second part of the question?
I think you hit both of them. It was, sort of what do you need to do to be to excel at being a diverse supplier, and then what are some of the hurdles that you're, are going to hit. So
Allegra, before you go on, can I just jump in?
Yes,
First
please,
off, I'm going to send $20 over to Danielle for plugging attorneys, but I will tell you that because part of my practice is I help LGBT businesses as well as other minority-owned businesses get set up and get through the certification process. And I've served on the certification board for the NGLCC, and I will tell you the most problems that occur with regard to certification is when somebody decides to shortcut the legal fees and go to a process known as LegalZoom or one of those online processes where they set up a corporation, they're in New Jersey or they're in Pittsburgh or they're in Cleveland, and they instead incorporate in Nevada or Virginia, and they don't understand what they've done. They don't understand, they don't read the operating agreement, which tells them that they're a multi-member organization. And yet, for example, the NGLCC, one of the hurdles is that you have to demonstrate that you're 51% owned and operated by LGBTQ individuals. Well, many multi-member organizations also have people who help them fund the operations. And if you put in a paragraph in your operating agreement which says that all major decisions require the unanimous consent of all members, you've then created a problem. You are not going to get certified under that situation. So as Daniel mentioned, talking to a lawyer first is really the best issue or the best alternative to try to figure out what it is you want to do. I mean, like Marco says, you have to have a plan, but then you need to talk to somebody, both your accountant and your lawyer, to make certain that if you want to get certified and that's part of your business growth plan, that's the kind of business you want to get in, then you've got to set up the business correctly the first time. Otherwise, you're going to get rejected. And depending on the certification process, it may be that you have to sit out for a full year before you can reapply. And so now you're a year behind the 8 ball. So.
Yeah. No, thank you, Ron. I was actually making my way to you. And I just have a quick question. If let's say you're incorporated in Nevada, are folks doing that because it's cheaper? That's it. If you get incorporated someplace else, or it's just
That's where LegalZoom tries to incorporate,
Okay.
tries to push you there because, like Delaware is known for being corporate friendly. And
Okay.
so you can, incorporate in Delaware. Nevada has gotten a reputation for, again, also being corporate friendly. And a lot of people end up incorporating there because they don't have to file annual reports and the like. But the problem is you get stock operating agreements, which don't necessarily comport with what you want to do in terms of a business.
Okay, great. Thank you. So that brings me to UPMC and to Ebony and to George, and I would like you to talk a little bit about what is UPMC doing as a company to increase your supplier diversity, and what are some things are you doing to make the process easier or more transparent?
So let me speak first on the last question, because one thing that everyone did not mention is you have to be good enough to start a business in the first place.
Okay.
A lot of people, say they're in business, they're actually in a hobby. When you get to the levels of a UPMC, our peers, and other industry organizations of our size, scope, and scale, it's our duty within supplier diversity, at least when you touch base with us, that we're going to catch that first and let you know now's not the time, at least to approach a UPMC. That doesn't mean that we cut off our communication. I'll let Ebony speak to our education and development program, as well as briefly highlight our web portal. But that is so important today, especially with the growth in individuals that are leaving organizations, quitting, say, starting their own companies. You have to be legit in what you do, let alone be legit in who you are as a company. We have several organizations, companies, et cetera, that have been approaching UPMC, and we're trying to assist them to scale up, but you got to be ready. You have to be ready when you're approaching us. And like I said, that's not to say that there aren't on-ramps to other opportunities. You just got to be ready. We've had several fly-by-nights come through. We've had several pass-throughs that say secured their certification, but they themselves are not operating a business. Our associates, they sniff that out real quick. And, we would rather channel you into one of our development programs, and I'll let Ebony speak to that, to help build you up in terms of your capacity to address, opportunities with UPMC. Go ahead, Ebony.
Thank you, George. I want to add to, I'm going to add some other things to this question as well too. But when we're discussing specifically UPMC, our education and business development programs are where our diverse vendors or diverse suppliers are able to become, supported. They're able to develop. They're able to grow. So, specifically our Essentials for Success, which is in partnership with the SBDC, we have been able to support those diverse companies with what I like to call a business acumen Bible. So it goes over those things that Danielle mentioned, attorneys. It talks about, I shouldn't say talks, but it lists all of the different certifying agencies in which you're able and where you're able to get certified, and also what those fees may or may not be associated with it. But this is a document, a binder that is given to all of our participants, which outlines, HR responsibilities, employees, how to interact with them, relate contracts. So it outlines those things when you're looking to scale up, no matter what level you are at within your business. If you're early stage or if you're a growth stage company, that is what our Essentials does. And on the back end of that, a relationship is built with the SBDC in which you're able to continue with further support as that diverse owned company. And so when we're here, of course, we want you to grow with UPMC, but if that opportunity isn't there, we've at least provided an opportunity for you to grow somewhere else with these materials and these resources that you have. I want to add to that, though, which is just blanketed, I feel, when it comes to any diverse owned businesses, understanding what their value proposition is. and how that specifically brings value to the bid or conversation that they are having with that organization. In understanding that full scope, I know George, I believe he mentioned, our capacity, the 90,000 plus employees, the 40 plus hospitals, looking at that full scope of saying, am I ready to approach an organization? Have I done my due diligence to understand what those needs are? What is trending? And most importantly, where are you providing a cost savings? The awareness that specifically for us at UPMC, that we have a discussion of the cost of healthcare, and most healthcare institutions wanting to know, where in supply chain management they're able to reduce costs. So what is that specific? Is it a new system? Is it a new process? What are you bringing to reduce the cost and savings? So I just wanted to add that along with what my colleagues are saying here when it comes to attorneys and contracts, but truly understanding the scope. If you're bringing a new feature, a new capacity that complements whatever that organization's needs are. And George is famous for saying, having some moxie there, being able to show exactly and brag upon your company, but able to back it up. You have to be able to back that up. And the way you're able to back that up is doing your due diligence and looking to see where you bring that a value addition, understanding the scope of work, and are you able to take on that scope of work? So there's some background things that folks also should take into consideration as, diverse business owners.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ebony. I'm having a little small technical difficulty. I'm assuming everybody can still see me and still hear me. I'm having a little trouble seeing everybody else. So thank you for that, Ebony. Ebony, did you discuss a little bit the educational development program? So let's say I come into UPMC and, your associates figure out like, I'm just not ready. I'm not ready to be working with you. What are some of the either trainings or classes that you might put me through as a new business owner who's not quite ready for this level?
One is going to be our Essentials for Success. So once you are registered in our portal, our web portal is the first touch point of visibility for both UPMC corporate and UPMC health plan. So once a diverse enterprise is registered within our portal, they immediately begin to receive communication about our business and education opportunities that we have available. We have currently going on our Turner School of Construction Management, and that is in partnership with Turner Construction. And so we are being a support and a resource to those diverse businesses within the construction industry via a 10-week course in which they are provided with an overview of the ins and outs of construction, what that looks like in building relationships, networking, what that looks like when it comes to bid simulation processes, and that engagement there. So we're providing an opportunity to directly engage with those decision makers of a Turner, of a UPMC. One of our other partners with Turner is the University of Pittsburgh. So having conversations with them in which otherwise they may not have had that opportunity. So once registered in the portal, that is where our diverse businesses are really able to see what opportunities are available. And then I'll add to that, we just this one other caveat is our fireside chats, which we initiated on my onboarding. And in that fireside chat, we bring to the table supply chain management. And so they're able to have that conversation, our diverse business owners to understand where we are at and how we are doing and how we're able to better support. But our Essentials for Success has grown. We are in Maryland as well as New York. So we are now tri-state. We have had over 600 participants thus far. In fact, we have a New York presentation coming up next week, George and I, so we're looking forward to that. But that partnership was key for us with the SBDC and being able to support and provide, again, once they have completed Essentials for Success, that continued support and relationship that they're able to receive through the SBDC.
Great. Thank you. And is that something, and this is for you, Ebony or George, something you could recommend to other companies that they think about doing this, about, you know, having some training and development for suppliers who are coming through their portals?
Well, it's ironic you should ask that question, because the Essentials for Success program itself is quasi-proprietary to UPMC and
Okay.
the SBDC network. What we have found since kicking that off in 2019 is that other corporations have heard about our success. Key to note, the Pitts SBDC Center has been ranked the #1 small business development center in the United States, part and parcel as a result of our Essentials for Success programming and its expansion from Pittsburgh to 4 cities here in Pennsylvania to now 18 SBDC centers in the state of New York, 20 SBD centers here in the state of Pennsylvania, 4 SBDC centers in Maryland. And so with that graduated exposure across UPMC's geography, it has now catapulted our access to diverse vendors. And the Essentials program itself is primarily established for companies that, #1, are startup companies, and 2, companies that have never conducted business with UPMC. We have been approached by other large corporations regarding Pitt's solicitation of a similar curriculum that would be developed in partnership with that other corporation. But to my knowledge, no other corporation within Southwestern Pennsylvania has executed on developing a similar Essentials program. And, you know, we're sort of proud, but we're sort of disappointed. You know, we're glad that we came out with this. We're glad that actually we've hit 800 individuals and companies over our past 3-year period. The sad fact is none of our other corporate peers, constituents have elected to even look at this type of programming to assist diverse vendors in engagement within their corporations. That's not to say that other companies haven't done something, but they've not taken it to this level where we're providing direct access, as Ebony mentioned, over a 400-page curriculum document that will take a company literally from A to Z in organization, finance, HR, operations, legal, you name it, it's in there. And the key point is that now any SBDC center in the state of PA, state of New York, 4 currently in Maryland, we're going to expand that next year. You as a participant can walk into any SBDC center and they have the exact same book. They're going to be able to say, oh, okay, you were in UPMC's program. What page are you on? Okay, this is where we're going to begin assisting you. No other company's done that. A couple have shared some interest, but they haven't executed.
And thank you for that, George. That's the reason that I asked the question, because you know, in our audience today we have, you know, other companies and organizations, and you know, I wanted to encourage them to think about doing something like this so that we can expand this, so that it's a deeper conversation and we can expand you know, the access to diverse suppliers. So I mean,
part of that, and I think you have a question that sort of surrounds what I'm getting ready to say, is companies have to make the decision to make the investment. You know, we're not doing this for free with SBDC. You know, we have a fiduciary commitment on top of our sponsorship commitment with the Institute for Entrepreneurial Excellence and the SBDC Center. And we have actually stretched and strengthened Pitt's SBDC to the levels that it is today. We've expanded their relationships now tri-state, because it was us as a company under my vision in this space that drove it there. You have to be able to make those executive decisions, get that sort of executive support out of your company. And then most important, you got to get the check. You got to pay for it. You have to pay for it because it's free for the participant.
Well, right. Yeah. Because it has the benefit down the line for the participant and for the company. So yeah. Correct. Yeah. I want to see if there's, you know, any comments here. What I would like to do with it, seems like a good segue to move to Marco and talk a little bit about what's happening in Cleveland. And I invited Marco today too, because Cleveland is close to Pittsburgh. It has some similarities in terms of a region, in terms of workforce, in terms of what is going on. But we do know that there is more just diversity in the population of Cleveland. So I don't know if there's any comments. I will tell everybody now I have some limited functionality in my Zoom, so I'm not able to catch people's eyes, but I want to see if there's any comments on what was just said by George and by Emily, or if not, then what I would like to do is move to Marco and talk a little bit and discuss Commit Cle and the initiative that's coming out of Cleveland.
Hey, Allegra, there is a question in the Q&A in regards to what George was talking about. If you have time to answer it real quick.
Yeah, could you read that out, Stan? I have the only thing I can see is the person who's speaking right now. So if you could read that out, Stan, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, sure thing. So does Pittsburgh's SBDC have a directory? And if I was looking to partner with one of these companies, can we find them through this organization?
I'm actually typing the answer to the question in the chat.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah, so Pitt has a directory. Currently through IW, I think they have over 4,000 clients. In terms of the directory for, say, our programming specific to UPMC, if I'm not mistaken, we are not allowed to share that for legal purposes.
Okay, great. All right, any other questions, Stan, in the chat?
I believe that's all of them.
All right, thank you. Okay. All right, well, I'd like to move on to Marco and have him talk a little bit about what's happening in the Cleveland region with respect to what we've been talking about.
Sure, Allegra. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about our Commit Cle initiative. So Commit CLE. As the name implies, there is a commitment required and involved from our larger corporate private sector partners in the region. What I guess just to give a telescopic perspective or helicopter view of what it really is, it's a cohort of some of the largest firms in our region, in which the organizations from the CEO on down have made a commitment to increase diversity in their supply chain and increase their diversity and in particular minority spend in the region. I'll give you a little bit of the background on the why. I mean, I don't think it's hard to understand the why, but specifically for our market, there had been a McKinsey study that had been performed on in which there was a study of 7 of the larger firms in our region, where they were transparent and shared some of their data as to where they were and in terms of spending, what areas they were spending in, who they were spending with. And needless to say that the numbers for minority, Black and Brown owned businesses in particular were extremely low. That's kind of where the concept of the Commit Cle initiative came about. And just to give you, I don't want to take this because I could talk about this all day, but essentially we have 18 organizations now. We started with the initial 6 or 7 that participated in the McKinsey study. Now we're at 18 firms that have signed on to the commitment. And just so you understand what they're committing to, they're setting goals in terms of increase of what their targets are independently or as individual firms in terms of their new supplier diversity goals and outcomes to be. They're agreeing to be transparent with the data and not hesitating. Obviously, our end of the agreement is that we will not be disclosing their individual data points to anybody else, not to peers, not to the general public. Thirdly, that they will interact and engage with the platform that we developed specifically to help minority suppliers identify contract sourcing opportunities that they themselves, the private sector partners, are posting by leveraging this tool. So it's kind of a medium of which we utilize, kind of like a bridge of sorts, to identify opportunities, and also for some of our buyers to also say, no longer have the means to say that there are no minority firms out there, they don't exist in XYZ space. that's no longer the case. They can use this tool to try to identify the firms that are out, that exist. And obviously, we're broadening the scope of it now that we have the Ohio MBDA Business Center. So now it's not just the region of Northeast Ohio, now it's across the state as it goes. But the most important piece, if anything else, to take away from the Commit CLE initiative is that what these firms are agreeing to is that every year they will identify 3 firms, at least 3 firms, minority entities that they will either engage with from a mentorship, contract, supportive services aspect. So we can't really, define exactly what that engagement looks like, because each of these private sector partners may be at a different space in their journey of their supplier diversity programming. But we work together. Obviously, I have one-on-ones with the representatives from all of these firms in identifying a plan, helping them identify the firms. And like we say, every year, then it continues to change. And what that is intended to address is the matter that if we were just going based on our aggregate data, and I don't think there's a problem in disclosing that, from our aggregate perspective, taking into account many of our larger firms that have shared the data, you could say that only 2.43% of our regional spend was actually with Black and Brown owned businesses. And look out construction from that 2.43% would be at less than 1% spent. So that is some real data and that's eye-opening. And for all of our stakeholders in the room, right, it was kind of like we need to do something and work on making changes. So what's also very important to understand is we also collect data in terms of how many diverse vendors they have from their whole supply chain. And wouldn't you know it, that only 2%, there was only 2% diverse vendors in their supply chain. So there's a direct correlation between how many vendors are actually in supply chain and the actual spend as a total. There's a parallel to be that's clearly lined out there. So if we focus on continuously introducing these large high potential minority firms that are scaling to these higher or larger private sector partners, the expectation is the more we introduce, the better the chances are to increase the spend and also increase the number of minority businesses in their supply chain. So yeah. I tried to keep it as short and sweet as I could.
No, that's great. No, I think it's great that they're sharing the data. I think it's great that you have these corporations who are committing to this, and that we have at least have some aggregate data to talk about and talk about how important this is, and that we're not there with the spending yet. Marco, what I also thought was interesting, and I brought this up before too, when you and I first talked about how some big companies look at small businesses and they immediately think it's high risk. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, because I thought that was also an interesting part, that small businesses, minority owned businesses are quote unquote high risk.
Yeah, it's interesting how, and great that you bring it up, Allegra. So it's interesting how this all works out, right? The implicit bias that may exist is we feel like we've taken out race from the equation, but in reality, what it is high risk or risk aversion, right, is at the top of mind when you're talking to the CFO or the chief procurement officer in many of these organizations. And even though they won't clearly draw these lines, there's this distinctive idea or concept that minority business, MBE, is equivalent to small business. So there's always this straight line to MBE equals small business. Small business is equivalent to high risk, higher price point, quality of work maybe X, Y, right? And these lines then eventually just draw, it's like as if it was an equation, it just equals at the end of it all high risk. So therefore there are arguments to be made of why they don't necessarily indulge in exploring or identifying a broader or more diverse group and make it a more equitable process, is because there are just no businesses that can handle us right now, that they're not of scale and capacity. And I agree, there's always the argument to be made that there are firms that may not be of scale and size yet. But my pushback on that argument is there won't be if you don't actually relay the information that these opportunities exist. So it's almost, if demand is never actually relayed, how do you ever expect supply to essentially eventually move in and equate to that? So my argument will always be, even if you don't believe they exist right now, get the word out. Let people know in all diverse communities that these opportunities could exist, because the only reason we have high saturation in certain sectors is because of the demand is always there. It's time for us to start sharing that there are opportunities in other spaces for a broader, more diverse group that can compete and be very, very innovative in their approach, can enter the space.
Thanks, Marco. So I have two segues here from Marco's points. I think I'm going to go to Danielle to have you talk a little bit about, and you've also highlighted this in your bio, that ProShare Services is able to do things on time, on budget. And I was wondering if you could talk about, how do you talk about being a small business owner, being a minority-owned business, and how do you excel at what a larger client might want, and to those points that Marco made.
I think one of our biggest, I can't think of the word right now, but what differentiates us from a lot of our competitors is our experience. So I made sure that I could have the strongest team possible around me so that we can provide top quality projects to our clients. Our team has experience working for large Fortune 500 companies such as Shell, Tetra Tech, UGI. So we have a lot of experience, and we have a lot of experience in different areas of the business, specifically in oil and gas. We've done pipelines, compressor stations, processing facilities, some refining. So a lot of that experience, we can look at a process holistically. And when we're executing a project, some people will silo their view to just engineering, but our team is able to see it from engineering through construction. That eliminates rework. That helps us get design tweaks into the engineering drawings, so that when you're up and operating your facility, now you don't have all these maintenance costs. Now, hey, we know you're going to do plunger lift in 10 years. So we're going to add a valve here so that in 10 years, when you have to do plunger lift, you're not paying thousands of dollars to do it, because you already have a valve there, and it's a lot easier to just connect it up. So we are forward thinking and able to help in that realm, especially in the operations and maintenance portion of it.
And what do you say, Danielle, to Marco's point of that if you don't know the demand is there, you're not going to be able to supply it? Have you experienced that at all, of like not hearing from companies because they just don't think there's anybody out there who can do it, and you have to say, hey, we're over here, we can do all of the things that that you just said?
Yeah, and I think our biggest challenge, our experience is mostly in oil and gas. And we're getting all these opportunities in commercial construction, utilities, and it's so amazing to me because our skills are in oil and gas. There's a lot of skills that are transferable. And so we're doing those low risk transferable skills in other industries where we're not putting our client or ourselves at risk. But in oil and gas, we've built well pads, we've built compressor stations, we've done all the maintenance jobs, we've done all the retrofits. And so in that industry, because of the bias, we wouldn't take on a well pad to start, but you can bring us on the same way a commercial construction company is bringing us on, through a tier 2 supplier, doing dumpsters, porta potties. And what value we bring, especially in oil and gas, is, well, we're going to help you supply your porta potties at a competitive rate. But, oh, you have a question about your broken compressor, we can help you fix that while we're out there at no cost. So there's a lot of value that we would add that you may not see.
Great, thank you, thanks. I want to give Ron an opportunity to talk about Three Rivers Business Alliance, but also specifically what you've done to expand the economic interests of LGBTQ+ owned and allied businesses, and particularly what happened with City of Pittsburgh and adding adding that, type of diverse supplier to City of Pittsburgh contracts?
Sure. So I would basically, just so everybody knows, Three Rivers Business Alliance, we are a chamber of commerce. And, as a chamber, we represent various interests. Our interests are representing LGBT businesses and their allies in what we call the Pittsburgh Greater Allegheny region, which is all of southwestern Pennsylvania, southeastern Ohio, northern West Virginia, and a little bit of northern northwestern Maryland. But I would answer your question by basically pointing out 4 things that we've done. So first, as an affiliate chamber, we are affiliated with the National Chamber, which you mentioned, which was the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce. It's commonly referred to as the NGLCC. And that is the organization which does the certification of LGBT owned and operated businesses. As an affiliate chamber, we have the opportunity to offer our LGBTQ businesses the ability to become members of our organization at $200 a year. And if they do that and they want to apply to the NGLCC for a certificate, the $400 fee that would typically be charged by the National Chamber for that certification, or the $200 for recertification, is waived. So right off the bat, you get basically a 2-for-1 deal, because if you join the chamber, you then get all the opportunities and networking abilities that you would get through your chamber, but also you get the ability to get the national certification at no fee. The second benefit that we offer by being a chamber is that we hold a number of, we do a lot of different advocacy for both the private and the public sector. And you mentioned it in your introduction of me. And one of the things we're so proud of is the fact that since we started in 2018, our goal was to make certain that we get the City of Pittsburgh and our region to recognize the NGLCC certification. And that it took us 2.5 years to do it, but we finally got the City of Pittsburgh to pass legislation to include NGLCC certified businesses in their procurement and contract opportunities. And just so everyone understands, we are the only city in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and quite frankly, one of the only cities throughout the entire United States which passed that type of legislation. Other major cities, including Houston, Chicago, Philadelphia, all have done it through executive order. And of course, executive orders only last as long as that mayor or that particular executive administration is in place. We, on the other hand, have done it through legislation. And so we are very proud of that. And that was something that went in place in May of 2021. And it deals with not only the City of Pittsburgh, but also with the Urban Redevelopment Authority and the Stadium Authority. And that will then allow NGLCC certified businesses to participate in those procurement contracts. And we are now going to other municipalities within our region, including Washington, Morgantown, West Virginia, Weirton, West Virginia, to get them to pass similar type legislation. Mm-hmm. The third thing that we do as a chamber that helps promote LGBT businesses is what Danielle talked about and others have talked about, which is just simply getting the opportunity to meet people. We do it through 2 or 3 ways. We have a lot of educational opportunities that both the chamber as well as the National Chamber put on throughout the year, but also we do networking events. And I know a lot of people think, oh, well, it's just a happy hour here or there, but those networking events are extremely important. George mentioned that, you have to be ready to do work with UPMC. Well, one of the ways that you can figure out whether you are ready to do work with UPMC is to, in fact, have a beer with them, or have a cocktail with them, or go on a hike with them. We have a glass blowing event coming up for our holiday party. We have 36 already tickets already sold for that event. It's a great way to break down those barriers, get to meet somebody. In addition, the NGLCC does matchmaking events as well. All of those are an opportunity to try to figure out whether or not you fit that space. And then lastly, I want to say that we started in 2018, but a year later, we also formed what we call our foundation. It's a 501c3 foundation, which means it's a charitable foundation. It's not a fancy name. It's called Three Rivers Business Alliance Foundation, or 3RBF for short. But through that foundation, we are able to offer and provide assistance to LGBT businesses. And in particular, I'm proud to announce that with the assistance of PNC Bank, we have started a grant program. And we are offering grants to LGBTQ businesses who are able to demonstrate and have a well-defined plan for growth and innovation. And I'm proud to say that we've actually issued our first grant 2 weeks ago to a business in the North Side who is an up-and-coming artist, LGBTQ artist. And so those are the 4 primary reasons or 4 primary things that we as a chamber are doing. And we have many more things in the pipeline. I've got a couple things that I'm holding back on because they're going to be our kickoff for 2022.
Mm-hmm. That's great, Ron. Thank you. And my colleague Stan will be dropping in the chat links to all of the things, everybody's organization, and also your emails. We are at 3:55, and I want to check first of all with Stan if there are any questions in the Q&A. Unfortunately, I can't see them, and then go from there. And if there aren't any other questions, if there are like some parting thoughts that any of you would like to leave us with. But Stan, do we have any questions in the Q&A or chat, please?
We do not have any questions in the chat or the Q&A, so we should be good there.
Okay. Well, with the time that we have left, I want to open it up to Danielle, Marco, Ron, Ebony, or George. Anything that you would like our audience to remember or walk away with, consider. Not going to call on anybody. I'm going to let you jump in.
I guess the one thing that I would say, and unfortunately I have a hard stop, is for those participants, continue the conversation amongst your corporate relationship partners regarding enhancement of your supplier diversity programs. It's only going to get better if more people get involved. When I look at the number of Vibrant Pittsburgh Index responses versus the number of Regional Investor Council members here in Western Pennsylvania, you know, it's very disheartening that we're not seeing a much larger, more global push across our corporate politic in this space. That just continues to demonstrate our effort in this conversation to grow those business opportunities across those corporations, institutions, and organizations. So for those of you that are on the call, continue the conversation, continue to push. That is one of the many ways, rather, that we'll continue to have a vibrant Pittsburgh.
Thank you, George. And I completely agree in terms of the Vibrant Index and that particular criteria, supplier diversity, that is most definitely an area of opportunity for our regional business community. So go ahead.
I was just going to piggyback off of what George just said. In terms of how to provide supplemental assistance to that directive. One of the things that obviously even through Commit CLE we've encountered is, you know, even though CEO signs up for our cause and says, this is exactly what we want to do, this is important to me as the head of this organization, sometimes we have the head of supplier diversity who's pushing against the grain because the system internally is not set up or built up intrinsically to support what their intent and their objectives are. So keep in mind, if you're in a role of influence and position to kind of streamline that, there needs to be a clear objective from the very top, but also the head of supplier diversity needs to be able to have conversations at the top so that there can be some real systemic change to the approach and may actually make an equitable system where you can really explore identifying new potential suppliers.
Great, thank you.
I think what I would add is first I want to say thank you, Allegra, for giving us the opportunity to have this conversation.
My pleasure.
And secondly, I think what's important for everybody is that they need to be willing to set aside their biases. I know Marco mentioned this before about implicit biases. We all carry biases with us. But you know, most people, whenever I tell them that I represent LGBT business owners, their first thought is, oh, they must be florists, hairdressers, or bar owners. And that's absolutely not true at all. Most of the certified businesses that are LGBT businesses are actually in the construction industry and professional services. Mm-hmm. And they're all fabulous businesses. I mean, like George mentioned, most people think, oh, small businesses. Well, you know, I can tell you that one of the clients I represent is a multi-million-dollar entity. And they are not small by any means, but they are very, very good at what they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Ron. Thanks. I wondered if that bias was out there that, oh, they must be florists or bar owners or that type of thing. Danielle or Danielle and Ebony, please.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would add to the point of Marco and the accountability piece, internally and with senior leadership. There's a difference between support and accountability. Support, we can cheer on, but that accountability is what is going to occur if what does not take place. So I want to, have that as a point of consideration. And having those conversations internally, with folks to make sure that those things are ensured in moving forward.
Thank you. Danielle, any parting words?
I'll make it quick, but one last thought that I wanted to bring up is that you may not realize it, but mentoring and bringing on a diverse firm can change people's lives. And so if that firm is able to deliver and do it at a cheaper cost, consider bringing them on, because when you have an event or you need volunteers for something, they're going to be the first ones there helping you, being there for you, putting in that extra effort. So just consider that whenever you guys are bidding out jobs.
Thank you so much. Well, everyone, thank you so much for this enlightening conversation. On behalf of Vibrant Pittsburgh and our panelists, I would like to thank Danielle, Ebony, George, Marco, and Ron for an extremely engaging and important conversation regarding supplier diversity. Today's session was recorded. It will be available on Vibrant Pittsburgh's YouTube channel and website, and also in our members resource section at vibrantpittsburgh.org. So I want to consider everybody's time. I want to thank our panelists again. Thank you so much for this enlightening and really important conversation. Again, my colleague Stan should have dropped a lot of information in the chat for you, but what I will do is I will also send out emails to attendees with more information. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Allegra.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon, and thank you for all of your time. Thanks, everyone.